My name is Hannah Brooks. I am 34 years old. My own family had spent months deliberately erasing my 7-month-old daughter from existence, feeding everyone the lie that my older sister's unborn baby would be my father's very first grandchild, while my little girl sat right there in plain sight. The betrayal sliced through me so deep I could barely breathe, like they had decided she simply did not count. It all detonated at our family Thanksgiving dinner in Portland. My father stood at the head of the long oak table, glass, raised high over the turkey and cranberry sauce, surrounded by 20 relatives who knew the truth but stayed silent. To my older daughter's baby, he said, voice thick with emotion, finally making me a grandfather for the very first time. My older sister shot me that familiar little smirk across the candles. My husband's hand found mine under the table and squeezed hard, holding my daughter in my lap as she reached for a roll I felt 34 years of being invisible crash down on me in one unbearable second. I quietly stood up, voice steady despite the storm inside, and said just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Actually, Dad, you already are a grandfather, and you have been for 7 months." The room froze. But what I did next set in motion something none of them could stop. If you have ever sat at a holiday table wondering if your own child truly exists, to the people who raised you, drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done in that exact moment. Because I promise the fallout was bigger than any of us expected. That single sentence hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. My father's glass tilted, spilling a little wine onto the white tablecloth. My older sister's face shifted from smug to wide-eyed panic in a heartbeat, but she recovered fast, laughing it off like I had told a bad joke. "Oh, Hannah is always so dramatic at these things," she said, waving her hand as if swatting away a fly. A few aunts chuckled nervously, but I saw the way my husband's jaw tightened and how Aunt Linda Hayes, who had driven up from Salem for the day, pressed her lips together like she was biting back words. I sat back down, heart hammering my daughter, gurgling happily against my shoulder, completely unaware that her own grandfather had just hosted a future that already existed. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of forced small talk and clinking forks. I kept my eyes on my plate, replaying every invitation I had hand-delivered to my older sister months earlier, every text I had sent my father with ultrasound pictures, every voicemail left when no one called back. My neighbor Sarah Klein had even offered to watch my daughter so I could drive over one weekend, but somehow those visits never happened. Now I understood why. My family had turned my greatest joy into their best-kept secret, and the weight of that realization pressed on my chest until I could hardly swallow the pumpkin pie. Later that night, back in our modest 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the Willamette River, my husband pulled me close on the couch while my daughter slept in her crib. "You were incredible today," he whispered, but I could hear the worry underneath. We had been married 6 years, built a quiet life together after I finished my degree in marketing, and he had watched this pattern for far too long. Still, something in me had shifted at that dinner table. I was done smiling through it. The next morning, I called Aunt Linda Hayes, the one person who had always treated me like I mattered, and asked if we could meet for coffee. She agreed immediately, voice soft but firm. "I saw what happened, honey. It's time we talked about what your older sister has really been doing." Over lattes at a little cafe near Powell's Books, Aunt Linda slid an envelope across the table. Inside were copies of the baby announcements I had mailed to my father's house, all of them still sealed. "Your older sister told everyone you wanted privacy. Because of some made-up postpartum issues, she said, 'Eyes sad.' I didn't believe it, but I didn't push hard enough. I'm sorry." My stomach dropped. That was only the beginning. Over the next week, my husband's brother, Greg Brooks, who worked in IT downtown, started quietly checking a few things at my request. What he found made my blood run cold. My older sister had created a private family group chat called Carter Thanksgiving Crew and removed me months ago, filling it with stories about how I was too overwhelmed to include anyone in my pregnancy. Even Uncle Mark Carter had asked about me once, and she replied that I had specifically requested space. The revelations kept coming in small, devastating waves. My coworker Jennifer Park at the downtown marketing firm pulled me aside during lunch one day and admitted my older sister had called the office, pretending to be concerned about my mental health right after my daughter was born, hinting I might not be reliable for the big client project I had been counting on. I'd lost that promotion without ever knowing why. Then my therapist, Dr. Elena Vargas, listened to the whole story in our next session and gently suggested I start documenting everything. This level of erasure isn't normal family tension, she said. It's control. I left her office with a notebook and a knot in my throat that wouldn't loosen. Meanwhile, my older sister started texting me sweet little messages about how stressed the pregnancy was making her and how much she missed girl time. I stared at those texts for hours, feeling the old pull to smooth things over. But every time I looked at my daughter learning to sit up on her playmat, something hardened inside me. I stopped answering. The silence from my father's side of the family grew louder. He sent one awkward voicemail asking if everything was okay, then nothing. My cousin Brandon, who had always stayed neutral, finally called me from his apartment in Beaverton and admitted he had seen my older sister toss a stack of mail into a dumpster behind her condo complex last summer. I thought it was junk, he said, voice shaky. Now I'm not so sure. Ow. The holidays passed in a haze of canceled plans and half-hearted excuses. My neighbor, Sarah Klein, brought over homemade cookies one evening and ended up staying for 2 hours while I poured out the whole mess. She had watched my older sister's car circle our block more than once when my husband and I were at work. I thought she was just being a concerned aunt. Sarah said, shaking her head. But now it feels different. Her quiet support meant more than I could say. Yet it also highlighted how alone I felt inside my own family. My husband suggested we host a small New Year's gathering with just his side, but the thought of explaining any of this to more people made my chest tighten. I was starting to see the walls closing in the way my older sister's lies had isolated me from everyone who should have been celebrating my daughter's first Christmas. By mid-January, the evidence folder on my laptop had grown thick. Greg Brooks helped me organize screenshots of deleted messages and timestamps that proved my older sister had been the one rescheduling every planned visit with my father. Aunt Linda Hayes offered to speak to Uncle Mark Carter on my behalf, but I asked her to wait. I wasn't ready for the explosion I knew was coming. My daughter said her first word that same week clear as day while I rocked her before bed. She looked straight at the photo of my father on the shelf and babbled something that sounded heartbreakingly close to Papa. I cried into her soft hair, the sound muffled, so my husband wouldn't hear from the next room. That tiny moment decided everything. I could no longer pretend this was just sibling rivalry. My family had chosen to pretend my daughter did not exist, and I was finished letting them. The pressure built slowly after that. My older sister showed up unannounced at my office one rainy afternoon, designer coat dripping, and cornered me by the elevator. "Dad keeps asking why you're so distant," she said, voice dripping with fake concern. "You're really hurting the family with this attitude." I stared at her perfectly made-up face and felt something snap into place. Instead of apologizing like the old me would have, I simply pressed the down button and stepped inside when the doors opened. Maybe the family should ask itself why it erased a baby, I answered before the doors closed. Her shocked expression stayed with me the whole ride down. That night, I told my husband I was thinking about setting some real boundaries, and for the first time, he didn't try to talk me out of it. He just nodded and pulled me close. Still, the fear lingered. What if speaking up cost me the few relatives who still reached out? What if my father chose my older sister's version forever? The questions kept me awake, staring at the ceiling while my daughter slept peacefully in the next room. I had no idea how deep the lies went or how far my family would go to protect the perfect picture they had painted. But one thing was certain, I was no longer willing to stay invisible so my older sister could shine. The fear lingered, but it was nothing compared to the fire that had started burning in my chest. Over the next few days, I moved through my marketing job at the downtown firm like someone walking through fog, smiling at clients while my mind replayed that Thanksgiving toast on an endless loop. My husband Tyler noticed the way I stared at my phone during dinner, and one evening he gently took it from my hands and said we needed to talk about what came next. We sat on the couch with our daughter Olivia between us, her little fingers clutching a stuffed bear, and I told him everything Aunt Linda Hayes had shared, plus the group chat details his brother Greg Brooks had uncovered. Tyler's face hardened, but he didn't push me to confront anyone yet. Instead, he suggested we bring in one more person who could help us see clearly. That's when he called his cousin Rebecca Morgan, a no-nonsense family mediator who lived just across the river in Vancouver. She agreed to meet us the following Saturday at a quiet park near the waterfront, and something about having another calm voice in our corner made the knot in my stomach loosen just a fraction. Rebecca arrived with a notebook and a thermos of coffee, her scarf wrapped tight against the February chill. After listening to the whole story without interrupting, she leaned forward and said something that still echoes in my head. "Hannah, this isn't about one holiday dinner. This is your older sister rewriting history so she stays the center of attention, and your father letting her, because it's easier than facing the truth." Her words landed like a quiet hammer. She helped us list every missed birthday card, every canceled visit, every excuse my older sister had fed the family about my supposed overwhelm. By the time we packed up to leave, Rebecca had promised to stay available if things escalated, and I felt a tiny spark of hope that maybe I wasn't crazy for wanting my daughter to know her grandfather. But that spark flickered the very next morning when my phone lit up with my father's number. I let it go to voicemail heart-pounding, because I already knew the tone he would use. The voicemail was exactly as I feared. His voice started gentle, almost pleading the way it used to when I was little, and he wanted me to forgive some small slight. "Hannah, your older sister, is really worried about you. She says you're shutting everyone out again and that this attitude is hurting the whole family right before her baby arrives. We need to talk like adults." I played it twice, feeling the old guilt creep in like cold water. My mother, Susan Carter, who had stayed mostly quiet through the years, but always backed my older sister in the end, texted me an hour later with the same message dressed up in softer words. "Your father misses his girls getting along. Can we all sit down soon?" I stared at that text until the screen went dark. The pattern was so familiar it made my teeth ache. My older sister had spent months painting me as the difficult one, the distant one, the sister who chose career over family, and now my parents were echoing every line without ever asking me what actually happened. I tried to focus on work, but even there the isolation followed me. My coworker Jennifer Park pulled me into the break room one afternoon and whispered that my older sister had called the office again this time, claiming I was struggling with postpartum depression and might need extra time off. Jennifer's eyes were wide with concern, but I saw the flicker of doubt behind it. "I told her you were fine," she said quickly, but it just felt off. That single conversation cost me sleep for 3 nights straight. I kept wondering how many other people my older sister had reached out to with the same story. My neighbor, Sarah Klein, noticed the extra lights on in our apartment and brought over a casserole one rainy evening. While we sat at the kitchen table, she admitted she had seen my older sister's car parked down the block twice in the last month, always when Tyler and I were both at work. "I thought she was dropping something off," Sarah said, voice low. "But now I'm wondering if she was checking whether you were home." Her support felt like a lifeline, yet it also reminded me how small my circle had become. The family I grew up with was slipping further away with every polite excuse and unanswered call. The pressure ratcheted up again the following weekend. My older sister showed up at our door unannounced, her hand resting on her growing belly, looking every inch the picture of concerned motherhood. Tyler answered first, and I stood just behind him, arms crossed while Olivia played on the living room rug. "I just want to understand why you're doing this to Dad, my older sister," said voice sweet but edged with something sharper. "He's been so excited about becoming a grandfather, and now you're acting like we're the villains for simply celebrating. It's selfish, Hannah. Really." The word selfish landed like a slap. I felt my cheeks burn, but I kept my voice steady. You mean celebrating while pretending my daughter doesn't exist? That's the part you're forgetting to mention. She laughed, that light, dismissive sound she had perfected over decades, and said, "Oh, please, you always twist everything. Mom and Dad just want peace. Is that too much to ask?" Before I could answer, Tyler stepped forward and politely asked her to leave. The door closed on her stunned face, but the damage was done. That night, my daughter cried for hours, picking up on the tension, and I lay awake wondering if setting this boundary would cost me more than I could afford to lose. Then came the call from Uncle Mark Carter, my father's brother, who had always tried to stay out of the drama. His voice was hesitant on the phone, like he hated making the call. "Your father asked me to talk to you," he said. "He thinks if I explain how much this is hurting him, you'll come around. Your older sister showed him some messages she says you sent talking about how you don't need the family anymore." I knew instantly those messages had never left my phone. My hands shook as I gripped the receiver. Uncle Mark sighed when I told him the truth, but he didn't argue. Instead, he just said, "I don't know what's going on between you girls, but the family is starting to pick sides and it's getting ugly." He hung up after that, leaving me staring at the wall while my daughter napped in the next room. The idea that sides were forming, that people I had known my whole life were choosing my older sister's version without ever hearing mine, made the isolation feel suffocating. Even cousin Brandon, who had admitted seeing the thrown-away mail, stopped answering my texts after that week. It was as if my older sister had cast a spell that turned every shared memory into something suspicious. Aunt Linda Hayes tried to counter the tide. She invited me for lunch at her favorite cafe in the Pearl District and brought along her friend, Dr. Rachel Morgan, a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. The three of us sat by the window while rain streaked the glass, and Dr. Morgan asked gentle questions that helped me put words to the years of being erased. This kind of deliberate exclusion often stems from deep insecurity in the person doing the excluding, she said quietly. But that doesn't make it your responsibility to fix. Her words gave me courage, yet they also highlighted how alone I was becoming. My mother, Susan Carter, sent flowers the next day with a card that read, "We love you. Please don't shut us out," but I knew the real message was stop making waves. I left the flowers on the counter until they wilted. Every small kindness from outside the core family felt like proof that my own blood was closing ranks against me and my daughter. The tension reached a new level when my older sister posted a long social media update about navigating complicated family dynamics during pregnancy that everyone knew was aimed at me. Comments poured in from relatives offering sympathy, and my father even liked the post. I sat in the dark living room, scrolling through it all while Tyler slept, feeling the weight of every heart emoji like a stone on my chest. Rebecca Morgan called me the next morning after seeing the post and said we might need to think about a formal letter outlining boundaries if things continued. I agreed, but the thought of putting everything in writing made the situation feel painfully real. My daughter was crawling now, pulling herself across the floor toward me with that bright smile that melted every worry, and I realized I would do anything to protect her from growing up feeling as invisible as I had. Still, the fear of losing the last threads of family connection kept me from sending anything yet. Then late one Thursday evening, when the city lights were just starting to glow across the river, my phone rang again. This time it was my father, and he didn't leave a voicemail. He waited through 4 rings until I finally picked up his voice tight, with something I had rarely heard from him, pure frustration. "Hannah, this has gone on long enough," he said without greeting. "Your older sister is in tears every night. Your mother can't sleep, and the whole family is asking what I plan to do about it. We're having a meeting at the house next weekend. Everyone will be there, and you will explain yourself. No more hiding behind excuses." The line went quiet for a second before he added the line that sent ice through my veins. "Bring my granddaughter if you still claim she's part of this family." I opened my mouth to answer, but the call ended before I could speak. I stood there in the kitchen, holding the silent phone, heart racing. knowing that whatever happened at that meeting would either force me to walk away forever or trap me back in the same old role. And right then, I had no idea which choice would hurt more. My father's words still echoed in my ears as the weekend arrived, and I drove to the family house in the quiet Portland suburbs with my husband Tyler beside me and our daughter Olivia, strapped safely in her car seat. The whole way there, my stomach twisted into knots because I knew this meeting was not about understanding. It was about forcing me back into the old role of the quiet daughter who never made trouble. My older sister had already texted everyone that I was causing unnecessary drama right before her baby arrived, and I could feel the pressure building like a storm I could not outrun. When we pulled up, Aunt Linda Hayes was waiting on the porch with a tight smile, and my neighbor Sarah Klein had offered to come along for moral support, even though she was not blood family. I took a deep breath, lifted Olivia onto my hip, and stepped inside knowing whatever happened next would change everything. The living room felt smaller than I remembered, with my mother sitting stiffly on the couch, my uncle Mark Carter pacing by the window, and cousin Brandon avoiding my eyes from the corner chair. My father stood at the center like he was conducting a board meeting, and the moment we sat down, my older sister launched the first strike, her voice dripping with that familiar mix of sweetness and venom. "You've always loved playing the victim, Hannah. Now you're using your daughter as a weapon against us just because you can't handle sharing the spotlight for once." The words landed like a slap, but I kept my face calm while my husband Tyler's hand found mine under the table. My father nodded along as if she had spoken gospel, then added in his quiet, disappointed tone, "Your older sister is right. This family has always been close until you started shutting us out. Bring us proof or stop tearing us apart." The room went heavy with silence, and for a split second I almost apologized the way I had done my whole life. Instead, something steadier took over. I pulled out the small folder I had prepared with just enough evidence to show the pattern without turning it into a circus. Copies of the unopened announcement screenshots of the private group chat, where my older sister had told everyone I wanted space, and a note from my coworker Jennifer Park confirming the strange call about my mental health. I slid it across the coffee table and said, "This is what erasing a child looks like. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to say I will not let you pretend my daughter does not exist anymore." My older sister snatched the folder, flipped through it, and laughed sharply, but I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. "These could be anything," she snapped. "You're twisting innocent mistakes into some conspiracy because you've always been jealous." My mother murmured agreement, and Uncle Mark Carter shifted uncomfortably, but stayed silent. The pressure in the room thickened until I could barely breathe. That was the moment my boss Karen Lawson's earlier advice rang in my head. She had pulled me aside at work 2 days before and said, "Hannah, families like this don't change overnight. Protect your peace before they drain it all." And my other uncle, Paul Carter, who had driven in from Vancouver at Aunt Linda's quiet request, finally spoke up in a low voice. Maybe we should all take a breath and let Hannah finish. But my older sister cut him off with a cutting jab. "Of course you'd side with her. Some of us actually care about Dad becoming a grandfather the right way." The sarcasm in her tone made my blood run hot, yet I felt oddly clear for the first time in months. I stood up, slowly lifted Olivia back into my arms, and looked straight at my father. "I love you, but I will not beg for my daughter to matter. From now on, the only relationship we have is whatever you choose to earn. No more excuses, no more group chats deciding my story for me. If that means I lose the rest of you, then that's the price." My mother gasped softly. My older sister opened her mouth to argue, but I turned and walked out before anyone could twist my words again. The drive home was quiet, except for Olivia's happy babbling in the back seat. Tyler kept glancing at me with quiet pride, but I could already feel the shift starting. The next morning, my phone stayed silent. No texts from my mother asking if I was okay. No call from my father apologizing. No messages from cousin Brandon checking in. My older sister posted a vague update about toxic family dynamics that everyone liked within hours. And just like that, the isolation settled in like a heavy blanket. Aunt Linda Hayes still called every Sunday, and Sarah Klein brought over dinner twice that first month. But the wider family pulled away exactly as I had feared. Holidays came and went with polite cards instead of invitations, and when my older sister had her baby, the announcement came through a distant cousin who clearly did not know what to say to me anymore. Months passed in a strange kind of quiet peace mixed with loneliness I had not expected. My husband Tyler and I built our own small traditions picnics by the river, with Olivia learning to walk quiet evenings where we talked about the future without anyone rewriting our past. Dr. Rachel Morgan helped me process the grief of losing the family I thought I had, and Rebecca Morgan checked in often with gentle reminders that boundaries sometimes feel like abandonment at first. Yet every time Olivia reached for the photo of my father on the shelf and called him Papa in her sweet toddler voice, the ache returned. I had chosen myself and my daughter, but the cost was real and sharp. The family I grew up with faded into occasional awkward waves at the grocery store, and my older sister never once picked up the phone to apologize. My father sent one short message 6 months later saying he missed us, but when I replied, inviting him for a simple visit, he never answered. The silence spoke louder than any toast ever could. Looking back now, I see how the years of small erasures had trained me to expect nothing. Setting those boundaries meant stepping into a quieter life where holidays felt smaller and family gatherings were just Tyler Olivia, Aunt Linda Sarah, and the handful of friends who never asked me to shrink. It hurt in ways I still cannot fully explain, yet it also gave me something I had never known space to breathe without wondering if my daughter was invisible to the people who should have loved her most. I did not get justice or a dramatic reunion. I simply got to stop performing for a family that had already decided I was optional. And in the end, that choice, lonely as it sometimes feels, was the only one that let me look at my little girl and know I had protected her from ever feeling erased the way I had. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to choose peace over family and felt the weight of that loneliness, tell me in the comments what gave you the strength to keep going when the silence got loud.